Hello and welcome to my channel. This channel is all about reading audiobooks from Erin or similar books. The book I'll be reading today is called Alpha's Tale, and it is a super edition within the series Survivors, written by Erin. Chapter 9. The barn door slammed behind the rancher and he was gone. The fact that he hadn't said a single angry word did not reassure Wolf. He and Calamity pressed against the barn wall, eyeing the 3 fierce dogs who held them pinned there. Inside the vast barn it was shockingly dark, as if the great moon outside had been extinguished altogether. But Wolf could still make out the glint of hatred in Sundance's eyes. He glanced at Calamity. She was watching her Alpha, and her limbs were shaking, but her eyes did not drop from Sundance's. For the first time in weeks, Wolf felt the old wild wolf anger rising in his chest. What right do these fangs of Longpaws have to threaten him? What right do they have to threaten his mate? He took an aggressive pace towards Sundance, turning his body slightly to shield Calamity. "What kind of punishment?" he growled. "Not as much as you deserve," snarled Sundance. "You'll be marked. Permanently. At least that will remind you to do your duty." Wolf rose. "Marked? How?" But before he could respond, Zora and Belle sprang for him, knocking him to the ground and pinning him down with their powerful forequarters. Wolf struggled, snapping and twisting, but there were 2 fierce dogs on him, and they were strong. Sundance moved swiftly. One of Wolf's forelegs sprawled on the floor, and the fierce dog lunged, breaking his claws down Wolf's paw. For a second Wolf didn't feel it, then the pain hit. He howled. The slash in his flesh was deep and bloody. Zora and Belle rolled off him and stood up as Wolf cringed back, licking frantically at his paw. As he rested it on the ground, he felt pain shoot up his foreleg again, but he could tell it wasn't so serious as to lame him. He'd still be able to walk and run. Sundance knew exactly what he was doing. Wolf would carry this shameful scar for life. "They've done this to me for the sake of a chicken, and I let them do it." He raised his head to glare his hatred at Sundance. "If I'd been a real wolf, I'd have taken the hens myself, and I would never have let them do this to me." "Calamity," growled Sundance, "show me your paw." Wolf's fury drained abruptly, replaced by horror. "No, it was my fault. Me. You can't punish her. She didn't—" "She was your fellow guard, and I warned her she was in charge. It's as much as her fault as it is yours. Your paw, Calamity." With one glance at Wolf, Calamity stepped forward. Zora and Belle didn't even need to pin her down. She lay down on her belly, her head pressed low, and extended her foreleg towards Sundance. "No!" barked Wolf, and sprang forward. Teeth seized the soft skin of his neck, and another set of jaws grabbed his shoulder. Zora and Belle wrestled him down, not breaking the skin this time, but gripping him hard enough to hurt and dragging him back from Calamity and Sundance. Wolf could do nothing but watch as Sundance raised his paw and slashed Calamity's sleek forepaw. Wolf heard her give the faintest, choked whine. Zora and Belle released him contemptuously, and Wolf staggered, but he couldn't even snap at them. He could only stare at the shivering Calamity as the 3 other fierce dogs stalked disdainfully to the barn door. It opened to Sundance's yelp, and he heard the rancher's low voice praising the brute before the door closed again. Calamity half rose and slunk to a pile of straw, turning and curling up. If she'd had a tail, it would have been tucked tightly beneath her legs. She didn't look at Wolf as he padded hesitantly up to her, then gently licked the tip of her ear. She flinched away from his touch. "Leave me alone." "I'm sorry, Calamity. You didn't deserve this." "Yes, I did." Her voice was muffled. "Sundance is right. I failed in my duty." "You didn't. I did." Stepping close, Wolf tried to settle down beside her, but suddenly she raised her head and snapped. "I said, leave me alone." Wolf backed off, shocked. He tied his tail between his legs as he stared at the back of Calamity's head. "She blames me, and she's right." His heart like a stone of misery in his rib cage. Wolf padded to the barn door and lay down. It wasn't latched or locked. The Alpha knew his dogs would never run away. He was the Alpha, wasn't he? It wasn't latched or locked. The rancher knew his dogs would never run away. He was the Alpha, wasn't he? Wolf nudged open a narrow gap so that he could gaze out at the speckled black sky over the far hills. He only knew where the hills were because that was where the stars stopped. I pitied that coyote. just for a moment, and look where it got me. Scarred for life, and calamity too. Wolf wished that he could sleep, but his mind was in turmoil. What am I doing here? I'm as pitiable as that coyote, and it's dead. Sundance, he knew, would have liked to give Wolf the punishment he'd given the coyote, but his scar of shame, was even that a proper punishment for one mistake? What kind of a pack was this? But how could I ever live without a pack? Rising, he nudged the barn door wider and limped out to the yard. The moon was smaller now and lower in the sky, but it was still there. Wolf sat back on his haunches and let out a howl of desperate misery. Great Wolf, help me. Who am I? Dog or wolf? As his howl faded, something tingled in his hackles. He went still. No giant starlit wolf bounded down from the night sky, like she did in the old stories, but he'd felt something. It was like a tug, insistent and demanding, at the nape of his neck. Something was calling him away from here, away towards the hills. He smelled sagebush and aspirin on the breeze again, and this time he yearned toward it. The forest. I have to be there, not here. And yet, Wolf padded on silent paws back into the barn. Calamity still lay in the straw, absolutely still, but he knew she wasn't asleep. He nudged her muzzle very gently with his own. Calamity, he whispered, I need to leave this place. Slowly she raised her slender head and turned it toward him. Her eyes were dark and very clear, but unhappy. What about your promise? I still want you to be my mate, but I can't stay here. Come with me. Please, Calamity. For long moments she gazed at him, then shook her head. This is my family, she whispered. The rancher, Sundance and Zorro and Belle, whatever else they are, they're my pack. Wolf took a breath. Even though they... Yes, even though they did that. Wolf, I'm happy here. It's the only world I've ever known. I don't belong in yours. I think you do. Closing his eyes, he nuzzled her jaw. I can't, Wolf. Don't ask me. I can't. If I leave then, I leave without Calamity. In that case, he murmured, I'll stay. His heart was heavy inside him, but he knew he couldn't leave her. I'll stay with you. No. Giving a great sigh, she gazed into his eyes. Wolf, you have to go. You need to go. But pain soared inside him. If you stay now, with me, you'll grow to hate me. No, Yes, you will. You'll hate me for keeping you here, and you'll hate yourself for letting me. She licked his face gently. You're right, Wolf. You can't be happy here. So go, right now. I'll give you as much of a start as I can. I promise. But I'll have to raise the alarm a little while. If I don't, it's not just a scarred paw they'll give me. Do you see? Cold and heavy with sadness, Wolf licked his chops. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I do see, but I'll miss you, Calamity, so much. I'll miss you too, more than I can say. Rising, she pressed her elegant head to his neck. But go, and go quickly, please. Wolf stayed for another moment, breathing in Calamity's warm scent one more time. Then he turned and bounded for the barn door and out into the yard. He couldn't bear to look back, so he kept running despite the pain in his injured paw, racing for the fence, seeking out the hole where he'd wriggled into the meadow what felt like a lifetime ago. With my brother in my pack, but they're not that anymore. I'll be on my own, but at least I'll be free. He dived for the hole. No! It had been stuffed full of fresh earth and stones. The soil was slightly loose, but the grass was already growing over it. He knew he could never dig through it in time. Another worry prickled at his fur. Calamity needs to raise the alarm, and soon. I can't let more harm come to her. Wolf twisted his head from side to side, searching desperately for an exit. The sheep field. There was a rickety wooden shelter in one corner of it, next to a gnarled tree. A rough structure to protect the sheep from bad weather if they needed it. Wolf bounded for the meadow, skidded through the gate, and dashed for the shelter. It was perhaps the height of 2 sheep. Wolf did not hesitate, but raced faster as he approached its star-silvered outline. With one massive thrust of his haunches, he leaped, scrabbling onto its slanted roof. Now he could hear furious barks echoing through the yard and the pounding of strong paws on flattened earth. They were coming for him, racing across the yard, 4 sets of paws. Calamity raised the alarm. She'll be fine. But will I? Wolf faced the fence. It wasn't high from the top of the sheep shelter, but there was wire with spines running along the top, and the tree branches were obstructing him. Sundance's raging barks rang in his ears, much closer now, filled with hate. He can't get me. Wolf leaped. His claws found an overhanging branch, and he hauled himself with raking claws onto it. His bushy tail snagged in the spine on the wire, but he tugged himself forward. The sense of the forest filled his nostrils now, and that something was calling him to game. The hills, and the rivers, the forest, and freedom. Jump, Wolf! He plunged down just as Sundancer's jaws snapped on his tail. Twisting, Wolf dragged himself free and tumbled hard to the earth below, the forest litter breaking the worst of his fall. His coat was full of grit and soil and pine needles, but suddenly he didn't want to shake it off. The scent of sagebrush filled his head, and he could barely even hear Sundancer's enraged and squealing snarls. Getting to his paws, Wolf glanced back through the fence at the furious, howling fierce dogs. Their eyes were savage and murderous, all but one. Calamity was barking with the others, but her eyes were soft and sad and happy all at once. He thought he could almost hear her voice inside his skull. "Goodbye, Wolf. Be happy." He turned tail and raced for the woods and for freedom.